The rain hammered against the windows of the old roadside café like a warning nobody wanted to hear. Travelers usually stopped there for two things: hot coffee and silence. On that bitter winter night, Caleb Hart wanted both. He pushed through the glass door just after midnight, exhaustion hanging from his shoulders heavier than the soaked jacket clinging to his body. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, casting flickering blue light across the empty highway stretching beyond the parking lot. Inside, the café smelled of cinnamon pie, burnt coffee, and grilled onions, the kind of smell that reminded people they were still alive after long days that nearly broke them. Caleb slid into the farthest booth near the window. He looked ordinary enough. Early 40s. Quiet eyes. Worn boots. The type of man people forgot seconds after seeing him. Which was exactly how he preferred it. The waitress approached with a tired smile. Her name tag read Lena. "You look frozen," she joked softly. "Feels like the storm's trying to kill the whole county," Caleb replied. She laughed, but it sounded distracted. Nervous. Caleb noticed immediately. Most people missed small things. Caleb never did. Her hands trembled slightly while pouring coffee. Her eyes kept drifting toward the entrance every few seconds. Even the cook behind the counter looked tense, pretending to scrub the same pan over and over. Something wasn't right, and then the door opened again. 3 men entered together. The entire atmosphere inside the café changed. Cold air rushed in with them, but that wasn't what made the room suddenly feel dangerous. It was the way they moved. Calm. Confident. Hunting. The tallest wore a black leather coat soaked with rainwater. Another had tattoos climbing up his neck like dark vines. The third man never smiled once, but his eyes searched every corner carefully, calculating everything. Caleb lowered his gaze toward his coffee, though he watched all 3 through the reflection in the window. Years ago, he had learned something important. The loudest danger rarely came from shouting people. Real danger usually whispered. The men sat near the register. Lena approached carefully, trying to remain professional, but Caleb noticed the fear hidden beneath her forced smile. The tattooed man grabbed her wrist before she could walk away, not aggressively enough to attract immediate attention, but hard enough to send a message. Lena froze for half a second. That was enough. Caleb's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. Across the café, the old cook pretended not to notice. Fear had made him small long ago. Caleb understood that too. Fear could either sharpen a person or hollow them out completely. The leader leaned closer to Lena. "You close at 1?" he asked casually. "Yes, sir." "You alone tonight?" Her hesitation answered for her. The 3 men exchanged glances. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. He had seen that look before. Years ago, in darker places. Places most people prayed never existed. Lena finally pulled her hand free and hurried behind the counter. She avoided eye contact with Caleb, but he could see panic growing behind her eyes. Most people in moments like this tell themselves comforting lies. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe they'll leave. Maybe someone else will handle it. But Caleb had learned a brutal truth a long time ago. Ignoring danger never makes it disappear. Sometimes silence invites evil to stay longer. The storm outside grew worse. Thunder rattled the windows. The highway had become nearly invisible beneath sheets of rain. No one else was coming. The tattooed man suddenly stood and flipped the open sign to closed. Every muscle in Caleb's body tightened. The leader reached beneath his coat and pulled out a handgun. Lena gasped. The cook backed against the wall, pale as paper. "Empty the register," the leader said calmly. No yelling, no panic. That made it worse. People trust shouting villains in movies because real monsters rarely need to raise their voices. Caleb slowly exhaled. He could have stayed seated, could have waited, could have hoped the men only wanted money. But experience had taught him another hard lesson. Cruel people become more dangerous when nobody resists them. The man near the door suddenly noticed Caleb. "You deaf, old man?" he barked. Stay where you are. Caleb looked up slowly. For the first time, the three men truly saw him, and something about his expression unsettled them. Not anger, not fear, recognition, as though he already knew exactly how this night would end. The leader pointed the gun toward him. You got a problem? Caleb stared at the weapon for a long second. Then he spoke quietly. You boys still have time to walk away. The tattooed man laughed loudly. But the leader didn't, because Caleb's voice carried something strange, certainty, the kind that only comes from experience. Sit down, the leader warned. Caleb stood instead. Slowly, calmly. The storm outside cracked with thunder at the exact same moment the lights flickered overhead. And then, everything exploded into motion. The coffee mug flew first. Scalding liquid smashed directly into the gunman's face. He screamed and staggered backward. Before the weapon could fire, Caleb crossed the floor with terrifying speed. Too fast for a man his age, too precise for an ordinary traveler. His hand struck the gunman's wrist. Crack. The pistol hit the floor. The second attacker rushed forward wildly, throwing punches powered by panic instead of skill. Caleb sidestepped effortlessly, redirecting the man's momentum straight into a heavy wooden table that shattered beneath him. The third man froze, because suddenly he understood something horrifying. This wasn't luck. This wasn't bravery. This man had done this before. Many times. The leader reached desperately for the fallen handgun. Caleb kicked it beneath the counter before driving one controlled strike into the attacker's shoulder, dropping him instantly. Not rage. Control. That frightened the remaining man more than violence ever could. The tattooed attacker bolted toward the door and disappeared into the storm. For several seconds, nobody moved. Only the rain spoke. Lena stared at Caleb in complete shock. The quiet traveler standing before her no longer looked ordinary. The leader groaned on the floor, clutching his arm in agony. And then sirens echoed through the night. Red and blue lights flooded across the rain-soaked windows. Deputies stormed inside moments later, weapons drawn. Everybody down. Caleb calmly raised his hands. The sheriff entered last. Older man, gray mustache, sharp eyes. The moment he saw Caleb, his expression changed completely. Well, the sheriff muttered slowly, I'll be damned. Lena looked between them in confusion. You know him? The sheriff gave a short laugh without humor. 20 years ago, he said carefully, this man trained half the tactical units in the state. The room went silent. Lena stared at Caleb again, now seeing him differently. Not as a tired traveler, not as a quiet stranger, but as someone carrying invisible history. Caleb looked uncomfortable with the attention. That was a long time ago, he said. The sheriff glanced at the injured criminals. Looks like you still remember a few things. Caleb didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Lena, whose hands still trembled from fear. Then, he finally spoke. Some lessons stay with you forever, he said quietly. Especially the ones learned surviving hard times. Later, after the deputies left and the storm finally began to weaken, Lena placed a slice of warm peach pie in front of Caleb. On the house, she insisted. Caleb smiled faintly. For the first time that night, the tension left his face. Lena sat across from him for a moment before asking the question still haunting her. Weren't you scared? Caleb looked out the rain-covered window thoughtfully. Then, he nodded, terrified. She blinked in surprise. But you still fought them. Caleb wrapped his hands around the warm coffee mug. Fear isn't weakness, he said softly. The real danger is letting fear decide who you become. Lena never forgot those words. And years later, whenever difficult moments entered her life, she remembered the stormy night when an ordinary-looking traveler taught her something powerful. You never truly know the strength hidden inside someone, including yourself, until life gives you no choice but to find it.